All right, we're starting test number 3 for abnormal psychology, and in this particular chapter, we're looking at what turns on and off these impulses. What causes the brain to be able to act like it does? We've got a lot of different causes. First of all, you could have something environmental that happens to you. Something happens to you and causes you to have a trust or mistrust issue, or something happens to you to make you have some type of trigger. Once again, we talk about triggers in here. What triggers this abnormal behavior? So what we're going to look at today, we're going to look at neurotransmitters, and this is really interesting because sometimes all the different, it's amazing how well our body works. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. We take it for granted, just like we do a car. When your car's running great, you don't think about it. And then when you turn the key and it doesn't start, then you're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my car? I need it to go. What's wrong with it? Well, our bodies are that way, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating how our bodies work. So we're going to talk about some of the biological things in the body. We're going to talk about the brain. We're going to talk about some neurotransmitters. Now, we had this before. I don't know if you remember, if you had Psychology 101. But neurotransmitters, neurotransmitters are chemical switches, chemicals that turn on or off a synapses in the brain. Okay, so neurotransmitter, you can just remember that, and when I ask you that on the test, you can just say it's a chemical switch. It turns on or off a synapses. So once again, we've got the nerve cells here, and we've got the dendrites here, and the neurotransmitter is a chemical that runs across these dendrites and causes this connection. So this chemical comes in there, this chemical comes in, and as this chemical comes in, this electrolyte causes this charge and makes these two to connect. So that causes this nerve body to send it down the axion and into the synapses here of the dendrites and make a connection, which sends what? Which sends an electrical current through that nerve, causing muscles in the body to respond. Remember what happens. The body is really pretty. It's complex but simple. The brain is telling the body what to do. Now, what the body does is just simply a reaction to muscles. Whenever we turn on a neurotransmitter, then it causes the muscle to contract. Causes the muscle to contract, and so that muscle works. And then whenever we take off that synapses, that neurotransmitter that's making the connection between the synapses, whenever we turn that off and there's not a neurotransmitter, there's not a chemical here, then it's off. So what does the muscle do? Then the muscle relaxes. So your whole body is an amazing system of muscles contracting and muscles relaxing. It's also a major deal when we talk about your heart's a muscle, but then we also talk about your brain as a muscle. Wow. So we actually work the brain. We'll talk about that a little bit different. The brain doesn't flex like a striated muscle. The brain doesn't flex like that, but the brain actually operates like a muscle. So it literally has a neurotransmitter that's flashing different parts of the brain. And when it flashes in different parts of the brain does different functions. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So there are 4 neurotransmitters. There's 4 main neurotransmitters that are in the brain. Now, these are all neurotransmitters in the brain. We talked about neurotransmitters in the body, like acetylcholine and different things like that. But these are the 4 neurotransmitters that are located in the brain. So let me give you those real quick, and then we'll go through and talk about what they do. So we have serotonin, serotonin, serotonin. GABA, G-A-B-A. Now that's an abbreviation for GABA aminobutyric acid. Now you don't need to know what it stands for, but I do want you to realize that GABA is simply an abbreviation, and you can see why we abbreviate it, because it's gamma aminobutyric acid. Gamma aminobutyric acid, so that's how we get GABA. And then we have norepinephrine, norepinephrine, norepinephrine. And then we have dopamine, dopamine. So make sure you've got those, and we're going to talk about what all four of those are. So these are neurotransmitters where in the brain. Wow. So when we look at these, can you imagine back in earlier times before we really understood these things, somebody comes in and they have behavior, and we see the behavior, and then we realize later that it's quite, it's controlled by the neurotransmitters. So serotonin controls certain things that happen in our body, and we release those neurotransmitters. Wow. And GABA, and norepinephrine, and dopamine. So can you imagine what would happen if you didn't have enough serotonin, or you didn't have enough GABA, or you had too much serotonin, or too much GABA or norepinephrine? So we're learning that biologically and clinically, which means, when we work to treat somebody with an abnormal psychological disorder, we have to check the levels of neurotransmitters, because we may actually give somebody medication to either generate more of the neurotransmitter or less. So here we go. So here's what serotonin does. How about this one? Serotonin controls behaviors and moods. Wow. Serotonin controls behaviors and moods. So what we have here, okay, what are moods? Happy, sad, mad, glad, that type of thing. We also have this behavior where somebody behavior could be passive, which means you have this totally laid back. Once again, we mentioned the word lethargic a while ago. It's not truly lethargic, but almost. If somebody's passive, then they're not violent, or they're not overly active. Or we could have somebody who's mad and extremely aggressive. That's another mood. So serotonin controls that. Well, what if we find somebody that's experiencing severe depression? Wow. So what if you're having severe depression? Your mood in depression means that you have lack of feeling, lack of mood, okay? And it's because you have a lack of serotonin. Well, that's exactly what we find out. So what's the problem? We're like, well, we'll just go give them some more serotonin. And that's what we try to do, but what happens is the body produces serotonin as well, and so finding that balance is just super crazy, because when we try to give somebody serotonin, we're trying to adjust what? We're trying to adjust moods and behaviors, and moods and behaviors aren't something consistent the whole time. We're not trying to adjust our temperature in our body. We're trying to adjust moods and behaviors, and that changes all the time. So all of a sudden you have more serotonin in your body, and you're giving more serotonin, then that will alleviate some of the depression. But what's it going to cause? It's going to cause anxiety. So, anxiety then is, now you're overly active, and now your mood is, now you're concerned, now your anxiety is causing you to be overactive in the area of your moods and behaviors. Wow. It is such a fine line. People that experience behavior disorders have a tough time, because medicine is really hard to regulate. Sometimes it's better to be on no medicine at all. Sometimes one form of the medicine causes it to swing over to the other, and you're in the process of trying to decide what's better, my depression or my anxiety. So, it's a tough one. And, I hope, I don't know, if you run across people that experience this, but serotonin is the neurotransmitter that controls behaviors and moods. All right. Then GABA, the gamma aminobutyric acid, this is kind of interesting, because this one inhibits a variety of behaviors and emotions. GABA is the shutdown, whereas serotonin is the turn on. Okay, so serotonin initiates these behaviors. Okay, it's kind of interesting. So if you don't have enough serotonin, okay, then you're going to be depressed. You're going to be depressed. If you have too much serotonin, okay, then you're going to experience anxiety. But what in the body shuts down these moods? We're like, how come I feel sad and then that mood changes? Or how come I have this mood? You know, and some people say, man, I'm just really moody. My moods are all over the place. I feel happy, sad, mad, glad, you know, just all over the place. Well, what happens is GABA turns off the mood. GABA comes in and it inhibits a variety of behaviors and a variety of emotions. So when somebody gets really sad and it goes to that point, then GABA shuts off that emotion so that person no longer feels sad. So this is kind of crazy now that we're gonna begin to play doctor with this. And we're like, okay, well, we'll give you a little bit more serotonin. Oh, no, wait a minute, we went too far. Now let's give you a little bit more GABA. Well, you can see where this is really, now this person's all over the place, okay? So what we need to know now, we're going to talk about a lot of treatments later and different things. What we need to know is that serotonin controls moods and behaviors, and it basically turns those on and starts those moods and behaviors. And GABA turns those behaviors off, all right? And then we have norepinephrine. Now, norepinephrine, N-O-R-E-P-I-N-E-P-H-R-N-E, norepinephrine controls heart rate and respiration. So that's really important. It's in the back part of the brain, and it literally, if your heartbeat needs to increase or your respiration needs to increase, we have another chemical in the body that can go whenever we get a dose of adrenaline in our system. Then the norepinephrine kicks in. So norepinephrine controls the heart rate and respiration. So that's the neurotransmitter norepinephrine. Then we have probably the most critical of all. We have the neurotransmitter called dopamine. Now, what does dopamine do? Dopamine regulates the amount of the other three neurotransmitters. So you know, really, can you imagine the first time somebody figured all this out and everybody was like, wow, I had no idea. But dopamine is produced in your brain, and it decides how much serotonin we need, how much do we need to stimulate the different moods that we have. And then it also controls the amount of GABA that we have, how much do we need to shut those moods down. And then the norepinephrine, how much heart rate we need and how much respiration we need. And then there's a dopamine that goes in and controls the production of those different neurotransmitters. So what's happened is sometimes people try to take, they try to take drugs or substance abuse, anything from marijuana to cocaine to any of these other things. And so used to be we called all that stuff dope. Now, why did we call that dope? The reason we call that dope is because of dopamine. Because what dope does is it goes in, when we take that, people are like, oh, we don't call it dope anymore, it's something different. But no, actually it's the same problem. The reason these are mood altering, these are mind altering, because what they do is they go in and they replace the dopamine. And the dopamine is masked by this artificial substance. And this artificial substance then turns on the serotonin and the GABA and the norepinephrine. And the dopamine no longer is controlling it. Instead, it's a substance that we've taken into our body. So it replaces dopamine. What does dopamine do? Regulates the other neurotransmitters. So we can see where that's a problem. So how could somebody overdose? Well, they take so much of this dopamine that we never get any GABA, we never turn off these moods, or our heart rate goes crazy because we don't turn off the norepinephrine, and our moods go crazy because we don't turn off the serotonin, and these artificial substance abuse things, we're like, oh yeah, well they just calm me down. No, they really mess you up because they cause these things to produce in abnormal amounts, causing your mind to be altered beyond what it should be. So we're going to talk once again, we're about done with this video, but I want you to realize that there's 4 neurotransmitters. Serotonin controls behaviors and moods. GABA turns off a variety of behaviors and emotions. And norepinephrine controls heart rate and respiration. And dopamine regulates the other neurotransmitters. So we'll stop there, and I'll see you in the next video.